The
as
Montgomery
Teresa's
estate stood like a
child.
fortress of power and wealth, stretching across acres of manicured lawns, marble fountains, and gardens trimmed with military precision. The mansion's towering columns and glittering chandeliers spoke of success that spanned generations. To the world, it was a symbol of victory. To Adrian Montgomery, it felt like a prison made of gold. At 13 years old, Adrian lived in a world where every toy was custom made, every piece of clothing tailored, and every wish granted before he could even form the words. But despite the luxury, his heart carried a weight that no amount of privilege could lighten. Adrian was failing at the one thing his father cared about more than anything else: school. Every morning, he was chauffeured to the elite academy where the children of politicians, celebrities, and tycoons were educated. Every afternoon, he returned home with another red-marked test stuffed in his backpack. The tutors his father hired came and went like the changing of the seasons, each one certain they could fix him, only to leave frustrated and muttering about his lack of focus, his laziness, or his so-called inability to learn. But Adrian wasn't lazy. He tried. He sat through long lessons, his eyes fixed on the board, his hands clenched around his pencil until his fingers ached. He memorized, recited, rewrote, but nothing stuck. Words blurred into rivers of ink. Numbers turned into storms of confusion. When he closed his eyes at night, he didn't dream of adventure or laughter. He dreamed of failure, of his father's stern face hardening with every mistake. Charles Montgomery, the billionaire investor who built empires with his mind, could not understand how his only son could be so hopeless in a classroom. To Charles, intelligence was not a gift, it was an expectation. "You have my blood in your veins, Adrian," he often said coldly. There is no excuse for weakness. Those words carved themselves into Adrian's heart like scars. Each test he failed wasn't just a mark on paper, it was proof that he wasn't good enough to carry his father's name. One rainy afternoon, Adrian sat slumped in the grand library of the mansion. The room was enormous, with ceiling-high shelves packed with books that smelled of dust and leather. The storm outside tapped against the tall windows, but inside, the silence felt heavier than the rain. Adrian stared at a math test lying on the floor beside him, its red X's like wounds on a battlefield. What happened here? The voice startled him. He turned his head to see Sophia, the maid's daughter, standing in the doorway. She was a year older than him, with sharp brown eyes that seemed to notice everything. Her dark hair was pulled into a loose braid, and she carried herself with a confidence that Adrian had never seen in the children at his school. "Nothing," he muttered, pulling his hood over his head. He kicked the test under a chair. But Sophia wasn't the kind to leave things alone. She stepped into the room, her sneakers squeaking against the polished floor. She bent down and picked up the crumpled paper he had tried to hide. Her eyes darted over the questions, and then she glanced at him. "You got these wrong not because you're stupid," she said calmly. "You just don't see the trick." Adrian froze. No tutor had ever spoken to him like that. They called him distracted, unmotivated, or slow, but none of them said it wasn't his fault. He sat up straighter. "What trick?" Sophia grinned, dropping onto the carpet beside him like she owned the place. "Every subject has a secret. Teachers don't say it because they expect you to figure it out. But once you know, it's easy." Adrian frowned, his curiosity fighting against his embarrassment. "You mean, like a cheat code?" "Exactly." She picked up a pencil and drew a quick pattern on the back of the test. "Take math. They make it seem like it's just numbers on numbers. But really, it's like puzzles. Patterns. If you look at this," she pointed at one of the problems he'd gotten wrong. "You'll see the answer repeats in a cycle. They trick you into thinking it's complicated, but it's not." Adrian leaned closer, following her explanation. For the first time, the numbers didn't look like an enemy. They looked like a game. His chest tightened. "Why didn't anyone tell me this?" Sophia shrugged. "Because they're teaching you their way. Not your way." That evening stretched on, the storm outside forgotten as Sophia unraveled subject after subject. For reading, she told him to stop staring at the words like lifeless ink. "Imagine it's a movie in your head," she said, her voice full of energy. "Every sentence is a camera angle. Every word is a sound effect. Don't read it, watch it." When she explained history, she didn't list dates and names like a textbook. She told stories, dramatic, fiery tales of kings who betrayed their brothers, of revolutions sparked by hunger, of ordinary people who changed the world by refusing to stay silent. Adrian's eyes lit up as the characters leapt off the page. For hours, they sat on the floor of the Grand Library, two children from opposite worlds. One was the billionaire's son, surrounded by wealth yet starved of understanding. The other was the maid's daughter, who had none of the privileges but all the insight he desperately needed. By the time Rosa called Sophia to help with chores, Adrian felt something inside him shift. The heavy chain of shame around his neck loosened just a little. "Wait," he said as Sophia got up. "Do you think I can actually get better at this?" Sophia looked at him as if the answer was obvious. "Of course you can. You just need to play the game differently. Trust me, Adrian. By the next test, you'll surprise everyone." Her confidence stunned him. No adult had ever spoken to him with that much certainty. For the first time in months, Adrian felt something he thought he had lost forever: hope. As Sophia disappeared down the hall, Adrian stayed behind in the library, staring at the pages scattered around him. The test that had once mocked him now felt like a challenge he could beat. All because someone had shown him a secret, one so simple yet so powerful. Adrian Montgomery, the boy who had been labeled a failure, realized that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't broken after all. He just needed the right teacher. And against all odds, that teacher had walked into his life wearing scuffed sneakers and carrying a mop bucket. That night, as the storm clouds cleared and the moonlight spilled across the marble floors, Adrian whispered to himself, "Next time, it's going to be different." And for the first time in his life, he believed it. The weeks that followed felt like living in a secret world. Every day after school, Adrian would return to the Grand Montgomery mansion, pretend to suffer through the endless drone of yet another high-priced tutor, and then slip quietly away into the library. There, waiting for him, was Sophia. The library, once cold and intimidating with its towering bookshelves, had become their battlefield and playground. The oak tables turned into workstations littered with colored pencils, flashcards, and sheets of scrap paper where Sophia drew diagrams, doodles, and silly cartoons that made even the dullest topics come alive. Adrian, who had once dreaded the sight of his textbooks, now leaned forward with bright, eager eyes as Sophia explained things with her unusual methods. "See, history isn't about memorizing boring dates," she said one afternoon, her hands waving dramatically as she stood on a chair, pretending to be Napoleon. "It's about people making crazy choices and suffering the consequences. That's all. People." Adrian laughed until his stomach hurt as she toppled off the chair, pretending to lose a battle. For the first time, history didn't feel like a punishment. It felt like a story he wanted to be part of. Math became puzzles. Literature became movies in his imagination. Science became experiments. They even sneaked baking soda and vinegar from the kitchen to act out a volcanic eruption one night, nearly setting off the smoke alarms. And slowly, something incredible happened. Adrian started passing his tests. The first time it happened, he couldn't believe it. His math teacher, Mrs. Rourke, had handed back the graded test with an eyebrow raised. "Adrian, this is much better." A neat C was written at the top. To most kids in his school, a C would have been nothing worth celebrating. But for Adrian, who had been drowning in F's, it was a miracle. That night, he burst into the library where Sophia was waiting. He tossed the paper onto the table, his grin so wide it hurt his cheeks. "I passed," he shouted. "I actually passed." Sophia looked down at the paper and smirked. C-. "Don't get cocky, Montgomery." But then she nudged him playfully. "Still, told you so." From that day forward, Adrian's confidence grew. He stopped sitting at the back of class with his hood pulled up. He started raising his hand, not always with the right answers, but with the courage to try. Even the cruel kids who used to mock him began to quiet down, surprised by his new spark. But not everyone was impressed. Charles Montgomery had watched the changes in his son with suspicion. He saw the test scores rise little by little, but instead of celebrating, he dismissed them. "One pass means nothing," he told Adrian coldly one evening at dinner. "I don't want average. I want excellence. You'll have to do much better if you expect to survive in this world." Adrian's fork froze halfway to his mouth. A lump grew in his throat. He wanted to shout at his father, to tell him he was trying, to say that for the first time in his life, he believed he could do it. But the words stuck inside him like stones. Later, in the library, he slammed his books shut in frustration. It's useless, he muttered. Nothing will ever be good enough for him. Sophia tilted her head, studying him. Why are you doing this, Adrian? She asked softly. To make him proud, or to prove to yourself that you can? The question hung in the air. Adrian hadn't thought of it that way before. Slowly, he realized that while his father's approval had been his motivation at first, now something deeper had taken root. He wasn't just studying to please Charles Montgomery anymore. He was studying because he finally believed he could succeed. Because learning, when done the right way, was actually fun. I'm doing it for me, he whispered. Sophia smiled knowingly. Good. Then stop worrying about him. Just keep going. And he did. By the end of the semester, Adrian's grades had climbed higher than anyone expected. His English essays, once blank pages, now came alive with imagination. His math scores reached the top half of the class. His history teacher called his projects remarkably creative. For the first time in years, Adrian felt proud of himself. The news spread quickly at the academy. Montgomery's kid actually passed, some students whispered in disbelief. A few even asked him how he had improved so much. Adrian only smiled, remembering the girl who had taught him all the secrets no one else bothered to share. The real test came when the school requested a meeting with Charles Montgomery. Adrian sat nervously in the principal's office. Beside his father, his palms sweating. He expected disappointment, another scolding, another reminder that he wasn't enough. Instead, the principal beamed. Mr. Montgomery, I don't know what changed, but your son has made extraordinary progress. His teachers say he's become more engaged, more confident, and his grades have improved in every subject. If he keeps this up, he'll be on track to excel. Charles's eyes widened in surprise. He turned to Adrian, truly looking at him for the first time in months. How? He demanded. What did you do? Adrian hesitated. He could have lied, told his father it was one of the expensive tutors. But something inside him, something Sophia had given him, refused to hide the truth. It wasn't a tutor, he said firmly. It was Sophia, Rose's daughter. She taught me the secret. The room went still. Charles blinked, as if the words didn't make sense. The maid's daughter. Adrian nodded. She helped me see things differently. She made me believe I could learn. She's the reason I'm not failing anymore. For a long moment, Charles said nothing. His pride screamed to reject the idea. How could the billionaire with access to the finest educators in the world be outdone by the daughter of a maid? But then he saw the fire in his son's eyes, a fire he hadn't seen before. It wasn't defiance. It wasn't arrogance. It was confidence. It was hope. And it struck Charles in a way no report card ever could. That night, as they returned to the mansion, Charles lingered by the library door. He saw Adrian and Sophia bent over a book, laughing as they scribbled notes and argued over an answer. For the first time, Charles understood, this was more than studying. It was friendship. It was belief. He cleared his throat, and both children looked up, startled. Charles's voice was quieter than Adrian had ever heard. Keep going, he said simply. Then he walked away. Adrian and Sophia exchanged stunned looks. Neither spoke, but both knew something had shifted. From then on, the library wasn't just a place of secrets and laughter. It became the birthplace of transformation. Adrian Montgomery, once labeled a failure, was no longer defined by red marks and shame. He had discovered his strength, his voice, and his future, all because the maid's daughter had whispered one secret. Learning isn't about being perfect, it's about finding your way to understand. And in that truth, Adrian found not only success, but himself.